Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to our Spinning Yarn speaker series on this Thursday, the 20th of March. My name is Matthew Rowe, and I am the CEO of the Campaign for Wool in Canada and its parent organization, the Canadian Wool Council. The Spinning Yarn speaker series, of course, was created at your request to learn more about the work of the campaign in Canada, to meet some of the amazing partners that we get to work with on a day-to-day basis, learn more about the Canadian value chain, as well as those doing wonderful things with wool all over the world. And on that topic, we happen to have a very interesting presentation today. Many of you are probably familiar with Harris Tweed. I think up until and this, I don't want to take too much information from your upcoming presentation, but I think up until the 1970s, I think Canada was actually one of the largest export markets for Harris Tweed. So I think most Canadians, whether they're aware of it or not, probably have some Harris Tweed in their closet. Harris Tweed is an iconic fabric brand going back to the deep history of the Outer Hebrides and the traditional methods of cloth production that they've been able to maintain into modern times. And I think what's really inspiring about the Harris Tweed example is, again, when we look at our own industry and we're worried about, that our wool is, we don't have the fineness of Australian merino and things like that. Harris Tweed is a perfect example that you can, make incredible high value added cloth using sort of the same micron profile that we have right here in Canada. And so I think it's such a great example to look to on what is possible with our wool. So the next time someone says, our medium micron wool isn't as suitable for clothing, Harris Tweed is a great example of how you can turn it into something really quite beautiful, special, and long lasting. I'm actually wearing some Harris Tweed here today, and in honor. And of course, as we mentioned, for those of you who joined a little bit earlier, last year on our trade mission to the UK, we had the incredible privilege of traveling to Scotland, and a big part of that Scottish visit was joining the Harris Tweed team on the Isle of Lewis and seeing their Shawbost Mill, and just the incredible landscape of the Outer Hebrides, which is infused in the colors and the patterns that Harris Tweed has become famous for. So, without any further ado, before I start to steal too many of the wonderful stories, I want to pass it over to Margaret and Ruth with Harris Tweed Hebrides to tell us a bit more about what makes Harris Tweed what it is, their business, and learn a bit more about this really special corner of the world. I should also note during our visit that you were very kind enough to roll out beautiful sunny weather while we were there. I'm told that is just the baseline for the Outer Hebrides. So I'm really I encourage everyone to go check out your beautiful white sand beaches, which are quite lovely, and as long as you don't dip your toe in the water. So allow me to pass over to Margaret Macleod, the CEO of Harris Tweed Hebrides, and the sales director Ruth Abramson, to tell us a little bit more about this wonderful brand and this incredible product that is Harris Tweed. Margaret and Ruth.
Great. Thank you, Matthew. Falcha, Sveskar Ma for Elan Joses Naherig. Welcome, everybody, to Harris Tweed Hebrides here on the Isle of Lewis and Harris. So I'm Margaret Macleod, Margaret Ann Macleod, I'm Chief Executive here at Harris Tweed Hebrides, and my colleague Ruth Masson is our Sales and Marketing Manager here at the mill in Shawbost as well. So we are from the islands of the Outer Hebrides. We were both born and bred on the islands, left for a little time for our education, and came back to settle back to the islands and work in the Harris Tweed industry. So both Ruth and I have many connections to the Harris Tweed industry dating back in our families, mainly on the weaving side, but also with the mill teams as well. So it's really exciting to be part of the industry now, as well as being part of it way back the generations. I'm seeing a couple of faces on the screen I recognise, Matthew and Lydia, and the others from the trip that were so kind to come over from Canada last year and come and visit us. So lovely to see everyone. And I think we've even got a Hebridean with us as well. So if we need a little bit of weaving expertise, I'll be calling on Becca, who I can see on the corner of the screen, to come in and just chat to us as well. So I've got a short presentation prepared, if that's okay, Matthew. We can chat through a couple of slides. I'll take over from Ruth on the screens. So can everyone see the presentation? Good, good. Okay. So in terms of Harris Tweed Hebrides, I think we've got both slides coming up, Ruth, on the screen. But display settings. Okay, I'll carry on with the screens the way they are, if that's okay. So here at Harris Tweed Hebrides, we're located in the village of Shawbost on the west coast of the Isle of Lewis and Harris. And there's been a mill here for round about the best part of the last 60, 70 years. There's been a mill around this village. So mill life in Shawbost is something that's very common to the community here on the island. When we're talking about Harris Tweed, many people ask us, what is Harris Tweed? We're lucky enough to be an incredibly well-known brand, but knowing the detail behind that brand is quite important as well. So in terms of Harris Tweed, the fabric itself, our industry gets one big name. Harris Tweed Hebrides are the main mill behind that name, along with all the home weavers and the other activity with the Harris Tweed Authority and the other organisations that goes on the island to form our island industry. So Harris Tweed is defined by the Harris Tweed Act, which is an act of the UK Parliament that was put in place in 1993. Before that had been a certification mark that was established around 1910 in the UK. We aren't the UK's oldest certification mark, but we're the oldest one in continuous use, or so we believe, but the oldest in continuous use. So that was put in place way back in 1910. In 1993, that was updated for what was then considered modern times. And the Act has defined Harris Tweed as a cloth that's been hand woven by the islanders in their home in the Outer Hebrides. It has to be made from yarn that's been dyed and spun in the Outer Hebrides, and the cloth has to be finished in the Outer Hebrides. And what's really exciting for the group today is that's always made using only 100% pure virgin wool. So we only make our fabric using wool. Here at Harris Tweed Hebrides, we choose only to make fabric using British farmed wool. So that is a choice we make, but we must always use 100% wool. Our industry is quite unique in its structure. I referred to it earlier. We have a kind of very unusual structure in terms of there are 3 parts to the industry, and each part is equal because the other 2 can't operate without the third. So the Harris Tweed Authority are a statutory body. They were formed when that Act of Parliament was formed in 1993, and they are effectively the guardians of the orb for the people of the Outer Hebrides. So they own that very special brand, Harris Tweed. They provide the rules, they provide the legal backing if we are challenged in terms of our brand protection, and they will also do generic promotion of the brand. But they don't sell. They're a part of the industry that is absolutely essential, one of the 3 parts. Harris Tweed Hebrides are a private mill. We're privately owned. We fund and finance all of our own activity, and we're manufacturing the fabric. So we're starting with scoured wool, and we're ending with rolls of finished fabric. If we want to call our fabric Harris Tweed, we must, of course, follow the rules of that Act of Parliament and work with the Harris Tweed Authority. But we can only do that with the army of independent hand weavers. There are over 200 self-employed hand weavers that must register with the Harris Tweed Authority, but they're all registered as hand weavers. We have Rebecca with us today as well, as a registered home weaver working from their own home, self-employed. So we work with those weavers to we've prepared the warps in the mill, and they're going to do the hand weaving part. So that absolutely happens in the weavers' homes across the island of Lewis and Harris. We have a very long history, as Matthew referred to, dating way back past 1844 is the date we have here for Lady Dunmore, who really is credited with establishing our Harris Tweed industry as we know it now. But for our families, that history goes way, way back. Harris Tweed was produced in all island homes at that time. where people were very resourceful. They were using the sheep and the wool around them to stay warm and dry in what can be a very harsh and wet and wild environment. But as we all know, wool provides fantastic insulation, and that's really where the roots of Harris Tweed have come from, absolutely from the people of the Outer Hebrides. So going through our history, lots of things happening in terms of challenges to what we do, other people trying to replicate or use the name. But what's really important is that in 1910, that trademark was granted, that UK certification mark. And then in 1993, the passing of the Act of Parliament. So these two things didn't create our industry, but they defined our industry and have allowed our industry to remain protected in terms of the IP protection and the protection as to how we go about running our businesses. What that doesn't protect you from is commercial forces, and we always have to remain aware of what's happening. We're always moving forward with fashion and design and colour. Harris Tweed Hebrides was founded out of an industry crisis. The industry at that time was collapsing effectively. It had gone through 2 decades of decline. And in 2007, our colleagues, Ian Yanges, Brian and Ian Taylor, founded Harris Tweed Hebrides here at the Shawbost Mill, a business that had been called Kenneth Macleod Shawbost for many, many years. And that mill had been derelict for about 2 years. And that's when Harris Tweed Hebrides started. So we're relatively new in the world of the Harris Tweed industry. I'm sure you all know your geography, but just in case, we have London down here, Edinburgh, the Outer Hebrides being pretty far away from all of that action in the cities. West coast of Scotland, we are a 2.5-hour ferry journey away from the UK mainland at least, and a 1-hour flight from the UK mainland. So we are just on that Atlantic coast, with next stop being Canada, obviously, if you go in one direction. But it's very special where we live, as Matthew was referring to, lots of sandy beaches. We have a small population. The whole of the Outer Hebrides is about 22,000 people, with most of those people living around the town of Stornoway. So no cities, a small town, Stornoway, other people living around the coast of Lewis and also the coast of Harris as well, down to the Southern Isles, the Uist and Barra. Harris Tweed has some very exciting brand values that we hold dear and are fantastic in terms of when we're out and about. Ruth and I both travel a lot to sell the fabric and introduce our fabric to new customers and new markets. It's rare and exclusive. You can't buy millions of meters of Harris Tweed. It's still small batch production for everything, from the mill, creating the yarns, to the home weaving part, to our finishing part. Absolutely about slow textiles, slow tweed and small batch production. It is indigenous and artisanal, and that remains for the team of skilled people here at the mill, for the team of skilled home weavers as well. We're very rich in history and hold that very dear. We've been around quite a long time, but our fabric is very practical, robust, lots of different uses going on now in terms of interiors and garments. These are some pictures from around our island. If anyone's read the book from Ian Lawson, a beautiful picture book, From the Land Comes the Cloth, I can recommend that. The picture here shows one of the weaving team. This is Callum George Buchanan, who is a home weaver based over in Oog, and his father, Shawnee. What they're doing is just moving their sheep to different grazing. So these are the activities going on our island from day to day. We do get some snow here on the islands. This is one of the beautiful beaches covered in snow. We don't get a lot, but occasionally we have a snowy day. More of our landscape. And you can see, starting to see here, where our colours are formed. You see these beautiful rich greens and heather moorland, where all the colours are formed and created in terms of the creative process that goes on. So Matthew, if you're okay, I'll speak a little bit about the mill operation and moving on to the different processes that need to happen. So in terms of here at the mill, we always start with pure new wool. And the people who are on the trip going to England will see more of this. We buy our wool through British Wool, and what they're doing is coordinating the clip from across the whole of the UK. So we use a Cheviot, primarily a Cheviot blend, and that clip is coming from Scotland, England, Ireland and Wales coming together. It is scoured down in Yorkshire, and it's the scoured bales of wool that we start with here, always starting with pure new wool. We fibre dye, so we have our own dye house here at the mill, and we will dye to 60 base colours before we start the process of blending. It's not quite as exciting as whiskey blending for some people, but visually this is way more exciting. So pulling all these base colours together to start creating yarns is what the blending process does. You follow a recipe and we will blend anything from 2 colours, maximum about 8 colours together. And that's what gives Harris Tweed yarn its richness and its depth of colour. After blending, you've got to carefully card, which means combing out every single wool fibre. So it's on carding machines that relies on very skilled operators carefully combing out each and every individual fibre to start creating your yarn. So you don't have a yarn yet after carding. You've got to spin your slubbings, spin your carded slubbings with a manual twist. So that's spinning frames. We have 5 spinning frames that will spin the wool to create the yarn. So at this stage, we have a yarn that's now usable. And what we do here in the mill, the design process, the creative process to bring the colours together for the yarns has already happened. And what also happens here at the mill is that creative process to create the patterns that become Harris Tweed. So my colleagues here at the mill carefully prepare the warp. So each and every project will have its own warp, your yarn that runs from top to bottom on a piece of cloth. And we have 1,400 individual threads that run across that warp, the width of that warp. So the warpers here at the mill will prepare that, and then we'll deliver those beams to our home weaving team. So here you can see a typical loom shed on the Isle of Lewis and Harris. And this is where we've taken this beam and the warp ready for the weaver to work their magic. So the weaver has to hand tie each and every thread, all 1,400 threads across the width have to get hand tied into the loom. They're pulled through, the loom is reset for the project following the weaving card instruction, and the weaver is using this bicycle action on their loom. This pedaling action is what operates the treadle loom to insert your weft into your warp and actually create a fabric. So that's what happens to create every single metre of Harris Tweed. The fabric will then be brought back in by our team here at Harris Tweed Hebrides back into the mill for that final finishing process. So that's starting with a wet finish where you want to wash and mill your fabric. You want to mill warm, wet fabric. So you're controlling the shrinkage, but you're also bringing out the softness of the wool, breaking down that yarn structure for the softness of the wool. The very last stage that happens here at the Shawbost Mill is fabric authentication. So we can't do that on our own. That's when the Harris Tweed Authority come in, and what they're going to do is authenticate every single metre of fabric. Did you follow the rules of the Act? Did you use a registered home weaver? What was the weaver's name and what was their registration code? All of these details are recorded for every single 50-metre batch length of fabric that we produce here at the Shawbost Mill. We are all about sustainability, and that is a key focus for everybody in the fashion world. Understanding what that means to every fashion buyer can be quite challenging. But when we looked at it, we certainly very quickly came to the conclusions. We had great sustainability credentials. There's lots of things, including energy, we're working on to make sure we're decarbonising. But in terms of our sustainability, some of the great points are here. And for us, one of the great points is only using 100% pure new British wool. We are literally supporting farming communities across the United Kingdom, who in turn are supporting this island community that relies very much, the economy of the Outer Hebrides relies very much on the success of the Harris Tweed industry. So those are great things. We're also working in a modern world, so we have lots of registrations and compliance with regulations that we have to follow to and adhere to. So that's very important here at Harris Tweed Hebrides. You're going to get a break from me, which you'll be glad of, but I'm going to hand you over to Ruth, who will chat through some of our slides and some of our customers that are interesting for you. I'll hand over, Ruth.
Thank you. So I get to do the lovely pictures. So just a few examples of what we've done over the years with our Harris Tweed. So interiors is a market that we're very much focused on building on as well. So these images here are some photography that we did a couple of years ago, and they just sort of show the kind of versatility of the fabric. So it's quite modern, quite suitable for interiors in residential properties, but also in contract use as well. So that would be for hotels, restaurants, different businesses. So a couple of other real world examples. So Neptune, they're a British company that produce a range of Harris Tweed furniture. So you can see they've got some sofas, chairs. We've also got some headboards and things like that as well. A really lovely aesthetic. We've also been involved in a couple of hotel projects. So the Standard in London was probably the kind of latest one that we did. So that was renovating a beautiful old kind of mid-century building down in London. And they've got some really great Harris Tweed pieces in some of the rooms. The picture down below here, so this cinema here is in the Blythewood Hotel in Glasgow. So I haven't personally been to a movie showing in this theatre, but I would love to.
I've been. It's very exciting.
Yeah, so they have a different fabric for each of the seats, so it's really it's quite iconic. Yeah, and there's a campaign for Will Project there in the middle that we did with the UK team. It was a team of students came up with some design concepts that we weave for them here. So that's always fun to do. So onto fashion. So this is probably our biggest story from last year. We collaborated with Dior on their Cruise 25 collection. So they had a big fashion show in Drummond Castle in Scotland, and we were very lucky to be invited down for that. So there was 4 of us from the Mill team went along. We were rubbing shoulders with some very high A-list celebrities. They didn't maybe they weren't really talking to us, but we were definitely taking some sneaky pics. And yeah, it was a very, very good day. So yeah, some more names. Polo, Ralph Lauren. We work with Ralph Lauren. Maybe not every.
Pretty much most seasons. They're buying.
Yeah. But as Margaret was saying, they have that really nice Harris Tweed palette. So browns and greens, very kind of traditional heritage look. Max Mara, on the other hand, went a little bit more on the kind of rich colours. So this kind of shows the range of fabrics that we can produce. So the richness of colour that starts at the blending process. So blending together 7, 8 different wool shades to create these lovely rich colours. So it just sort of depends what the customer is looking for. We can do the heritage thing, we can do the funky modern thing. Tom Brown.
Talking of modern,
bringing the two together. So they love to get a classic black and white herringbone, but they do something very interesting with it. So we always love to see what the runway shows look like when they've been buying our tweeds. So always want to kind of look out for. And the Hermes development. So this was a special design that we produced for them. So we do a lot of bespoke work for our designer customers as well. So developing a range that's exclusive to them. They'll come to us with a concept, and we'll work very closely with them on realizing that. So this was a lovely bag collection with Hermes. Kenzo here doing something very cool. So the fabric, it's not a stripy fabric, although it does look like a stripy fabric. That's different panels of Harris Tweed, so different like pink, grey, and I think it's a navy maybe.
Yeah.
So yeah, very interesting designs that our customers create with our fabrics. So we're very fortunate to work with many of the kind of very recognized European brands, American brands. We're always working with interesting customers over in the Far East, so Korea, Japan, creating some really interesting work with our fabrics, and that's always really exciting to see. Yeah, so that's the end of our presentation here. So yeah, Harris Tweed Hebrides, we're our kind of goal is to preserve the industry, to kind of push it forward, and to be very mindful of the kind of heritage and the history that we're very fortunate to have here in the Outer Hebrides. So it's yeah, the authenticity and the provenance is sort of our major selling point, and that's yeah, that's our key, our brand. Yeah. So I'll just close the presentation here, and I'll hand you back over to Matthew.
Yep, happy to take any questions, Matthew.
Oh, I think you're still on mute.
Yes, I'm back. Here I am. Yeah, I think we've got a couple questions already popping up. So again, anyone who would like to ask a question, pop it in the chat or raise your hand to do a video question. I just before we dive into the questions, I just wanted to share a couple photos as well because again, Harris Tweed has been a brand that has been so intertwined, if you'll allow me, on our own journey, and from the very beginning of the campaign for wool in Canada and globally, with the campaign for wool, Harris Tweed has been there from the very start. So I just wanted to show a couple Harris Tweed pictures with a Canadian connection. So many years back, we actually had the authority at the Royal Winter Fair where we installed a wool house, which included the bed there you see and these chairs, which were manufactured in Toronto, but using beautiful Harris Tweed. And we also had from that same collection. Let me see here. We also had a bit of a celebrity dressing opportunity. So when we did that. When we did that beautiful installation at the Royal Winter Fair, we also got selection of three different types of Harris Tweed fabric that we passed on to three very special ladies. So you'll see there Harris Tweed done three ways. One with Melissa Grello from CTV's The Social, people will recognize the morning show there. Our former Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, the Honorable Elizabeth Dowdeswell, who made that beautiful cape, and she actually made that one herself. So the other two people got other designers to make the clothes for them at their instruction. Ms. Dowdeswell actually sewed that cape herself because that was one of her hobbies, and she still wears it to this day. In fact, we did a reception with her for Wool Month 2 years ago, and she wore that cape to our event. She still has fond memories. And then Sylvia Mantello, one of Toronto's biggest philanthropists, you'll see that beautiful Harris Tweed skirt and cape with the embroidered birds on it, which was done by the Toronto-based designer Michael Kale. And then just before I open things up entirely, we had a lovely Harris Tweed coat a couple years back as part of the collection with the at Holt Renfrew that we do every year, and have used Harris Tweed a number of times. Again, always with Canadian designers and often Canadian manufacturing, but with that beautiful Harris Tweed cloth. So with that, happy to open it up to questions, and maybe Lydia, if you'll help moderate some of the questions.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. We've gotten some really good questions in the chat so far. Margaret and Ruth, if you could explain a little bit about the cloth width. Someone's asking if it's single width or...
Yes, our cloth is all double width. There is still some single width production, and Rebecca, who's on the screens, still produces single width production. So Rebecca will buy her yarn here at the mill. She will warp her own projects and find her own projects and customers, and then we will finish her single width fabric here at the mill. So there is a small amount of single width production absolutely happening. The cloth that's sold here by Harris Tweed Hebrides is all on that Griffiths double width loom that we saw in those pictures with the bicycle action.
And I do remember from our visit, Margaret, that that changeover from single width to double width was quite a controversial transition for the industry. I wonder if you could speak to that.
Absolutely. It was a very challenging time. The industry in the late 80s and early 90s was starting to decline. The world had moved to fleece. The concept of everyone having a smart sports coat was kind of dying, and trends were changing. So the industry was struggling a little bit across various markets, and they started to look at introducing a wider cloth. So initially the loom was going to produce two single widths at the same time. They weren't looking at a double width as such, but they were looking at efficiency of production and trying to ensure the weavers were earning a good living from home weaving, and that obviously the mill operation was economical as well. So the initial plan was to have a wider loom to allow two single widths to be woven at the same time. Now that was sort of overtaken as the industry realized actually double width was what the markets were looking for to ensure that cloth, which was starting to be cut on big cutting tables, could be managed. That narrower width is a beautiful width, but is slightly more challenging when it comes to production of garments on a larger scale. It's different when you're hand cutting and you're tailoring one garment. We're looking for slightly bigger orders, not that we can't fulfill those smaller orders. To maintain the whole mill operation and the economics of the operation, you do need that combination of small orders, medium-sized orders, and some volume orders coming into the business as well. But yes, that transition, my father had one of the first generations of double width loom. He had taken early retirement and set up his weaving shed in about 1993-94 with that, what we still call the new loom, but that was last century in 1993. I was in university, so a few years back for the new loom.
Not that long ago.
Not that long. No. Thanks, Ruth.
Thank you so much. A slightly related question around your spinning. Do you do single ply or do you do double ply?
Always single ply. We don't do any twisting. So to have a double ply would really be too thick for the looms. So always single ply.
Perfect, thank you. So there are a couple of questions around micron and different sheep breeds that you use throughout the year. So is there any difference in quality depending if you're using Hebridean sheep or British sheep, and if you have any idea of the micron that you're working with?
Yeah, the micron is about 31 microns, so it is it's on the coarser side of wool, as Matthew was referring to. We aren't able in the UK to produce the fineness that you get from the Southern Hemisphere. There are small flocks of merino here in the UK, usually in England, but we're using several tons of wool a week here at the Harris Tweed Hebrides Mill. So although that sounds a large number, in manufacturing terms, it's still a relatively small number. So we use that Cheviot blend, which is about 31 micron, and Hebridean sheep are a different breed effectively. So we are using Cheviot, and some of those Cheviot fleeces are coming from the Outer Hebrides. They do have to go to the British wool system to be graded and to be scoured. We don't have scouring facilities here on the island. There are only 2 scouring facilities in the whole of the United Kingdom. So we absolutely have some Hebridean fleece in the wool that we are using, but we do rely on the wider farming community around the United Kingdom really for our fleece and our clip. It's important to remember the average size of a UK farm, of a UK flock at a UK farm is 250 head of sheep. So that's still pretty small scale in terms of all the farming that's feeding into our system.
I believe our average is 300, so we're not that far off.
Ah, we're
We
about the
have a
same,
very
yeah.
similar setup. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. There was a question around kind of environmental sustainability. So someone is wondering if you are recycling water after dyeing.
Well, here in the Outer Hebrides, water is in huge supply. Very often we have too much water as our challenge. However, that doesn't take away for the need to be recycling and to be using all natural resources effectively. At the moment, we don't have a facility to recycle our water. I can confirm we have effluent management, and that is very strongly regulated here in the United Kingdom, as I've no doubt it will be in Canada as well. So we do have effluent management. We're not at a point yet where we're able to recycle our water, but that's certainly all of these, as well as decarbonising, recycling water, and all of these improvements are things that we are certainly aware of and looking at for the future.
Yeah, and Nicole had a question around the governance around the 3 pillars of Harris Tweed. And Nicole, feel free to unmute yourself if I don't read your question correctly. But it goes like this. So, how do development conversations happen? I.e., for the change of the loom width, does it start with a Harris Tweed authority or the mill or the weavers? And how are these talks then converted and how is the information disseminated between different stakeholders?
Well, we're involved in various projects as an industry. One of those most recent one has been around weaver training. So bringing in the next generation, training the next generation for either mill activities and the skills needed in the mill or the skills needed in the weaving population are hugely important to Harris Tweed Hebrides from a business perspective, but also as an industry. We live on an island where there is zero unemployment, so it's really important we're attracting young people and people from all generations to come into our industry. So the industry, various ways, either the Harris Tweed Authority, we would maybe approach them and say, this is a challenge for us as a business. Can you help us speak with the weaving community? And the 3 parties come together. I was at a meeting last week where the 3 parties, there's an association of Harris Tweed weavers, the private mills come to the table, the Harris Tweed Authority were at the table, it was in their offices. So it kind of depends on the subject matter. We don't get together every day or every week, but we have lots of areas we're collaborating on, and certainly training is one of those areas. Skills development across the industry is another area that we're working on together at the moment. So lots of collaboration happening on subject-specific topics.
Thank you very much for your answer.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Margaret. So we have a question around skills development and skills preservations. It's one of the questions that I had prepared in advance too, but I'll read the one caller had asked. So what are the key risks do you see impacting your industry in terms of out migration on the island, since you're a pretty remote community? So how do you ensure that those skills are still passed down from one generation to another into the future?
Well, that is a challenge for us. We are a community that is a very small population and a small working population. We're also an aging community. But what I think is really important is when we have regular year-round, week-on-week employment to offer, young people and families will stay on the island and form those communities. So having a robust industry is hugely important to maintaining people here and maintaining employment on the island, which means people don't have to leave to go to the mainland or further afield for employment. They have good employment prospects here. Transferring those skills is hugely challenging. I think that applies in Canada, across the UK when it comes to textile manufacturing skills. So that starts here with our dye house, the very first process. Each of the processes you saw today requires a huge number of skilled operators to make that happen. And we've been undergoing a process of working with industry experts, so people, mainly people rather than academics, mainly people who have been working at the coal face of the industry for many years. So we work on that support system, also with the weaver training. That training has been done where a more experienced weaver is training a new weaver. And what we've done as an industry is put in place, whether that is financial support to let that happen, or tutorial support or materials that are needed. The industry has worked together on that. But it's a challenge that we're facing right now, like many textile businesses, certainly across the UK, with an industry that has contracted hugely over the last 2-3 decades for sure. And it's something we're working very hard to stay on top of.
Absolutely. I think we can definitely relate here in Canada.
Yeah, I'm hoping that when you were over visiting us, you would see the demographic of people. We went out to some weaving sheds as well, but the demographic of colleagues here at Harris Tweed Hebrides. We employ 70 people here, and I think I can, well, I know I can say for sure, we have a great age range of people from 70 right down to 21 and everything else in between. So that's a really great message for our industry as well.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I certainly remember that from our visit.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Our phone's ringing.
No
Just
worries.
pick it up.
So, Margaret, perhaps it's also a slightly related question around the surges in demand, the sort of the booms and then the quieter times. How do you tend to navigate those? Because it's something that we've heard a lot also from our industry here, that during the pandemic there was such a big wave of supporting Canadian, and then things have gone a bit quiet. So how do you navigate these sorts of ebbs and flows?
Well, it's certainly something. When Harris Tweed Hebrides started out, it wasn't about growing big as such, not that they didn't have ambition. It was about having stable, steady employment week on week on week across the whole year. And we are, as you all know, wool focused. And with that kosher wool that we're using in terms of the micron, in terms of the Cheviot blend, and in terms of our woolen manufacturing processes, for garments, we are purely a winter fabric. But what we've put a lot of work into is working with new customers and new market sectors like accessories. So, for example, this year we have quite a lot of footwear customers. We have a collaboration with Adidas that's already out. We have other collaborations coming, particularly Clark's is one of the major ones. They have a fantastic Harris Tweed collection of ladies and gents shoes that's coming pretty soon. So we've been working on those other items, bags and shoes and things where there is less seasonality, perhaps a slightly longer selling season. Oh, somebody's showing me a beautiful handbag in the screen there. Is that Jaina? Beautiful handbag. Those things have been hugely beneficial in terms of evening out demand. Rather than focusing on that garment peak months of May, June and July, where you must have delivered your fabric. Interiors is another area for us where there's just a little bit more stability and a spread of demand across the year rather than one specific season. But every January we start afresh. We have a completely empty order book ahead of us, and every January is a new year. So always a challenge, but one we're up for.
Fantastic. Someone is also asking if you take interns. There's some interest in moving together already.
Well, we are certainly happy to have visitors. It's with a small team. Certainly do get in touch. We'll see what we can do. It tends to be more, coming and spending a day with us, a couple of days with us, rather than full internships.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Could you tell us a little bit about which markets drive most of your business? So in terms of domestic UK brands and international customers, what breakdown do you have at the moment?
Yeah, most of our business right now, so we're about 60% UK. We've had a lot of growth in the UK, and that accessory business we were talking about is largely UK, but not solely UK based, but a large proportion of these customers are UK based. Also, our interior business in the UK is stronger in the UK than any other market, but we hope with some trade show activity and contacts we're making that will change, perhaps Canada as well included in there. So the rest of the market, so about 40% being export, and that's primarily America, North America. So Canada and the USA still hugely important for us as an export market. France, Italy, and Germany in terms of our key European markets, and then it would be Japan and South Korea in terms of the Far East. So those countries are our main export markets. For export, primarily the garment sector, a little bit in accessories. We do work with people like Supreme, baseball hats and things. So, but primarily garments, either in the couture sector or more into that mid-market fashion sector.
Do you find that you have to adjust your communications to different markets? How do you see the variations in the perception of the brand, for example, between North America and Asia and Europe?
Absolutely. North America has a huge history of trading with Harris Tweed, going way back into probably 40s, 50s, 60s, way back into last century, where that trading history had come about. So lots of people might not know everything about Harris Tweed, but brand recognition in North America, Canada, and the USA, brand recognition in the UK, and brand recognition in countries like Germany and France and Italy is very, very high. Japan, I would say the same, hugely well-informed consumers, and I would say now South Korea is also similar. We've done, both of us have traveled in China as well, and the Chinese have a consumer base looking for that little bit of provenance, those special things from the UK. And what we found there was quite unusual because there was zero brand recognition other than perhaps having seen the brand in stores recently. There isn't any trading history directly with the Chinese consumer. So it was really interesting for us both to kind of try and understand that. And it's an area where we're doing some work on. But yeah.
They also sort of they operate in a completely different way to most of the other markets we work with. So they do like a pre-sale on a lot of their garments. So that doesn't tend to be how the kind of traditional fashion retailers work. You know, you're kind of taking a chance, you're taking a guess on what might work for the next season. Whereas in China, they'll manufacture a garment and they use their version of TikTok, Instagram, all of these social media channels to sell through their product, and then they need you to be manufacturing your fabric for them on a very tight deadline to kind of get that turnaround on the product for their customers. So it's yeah, lots of challenges, but lots of opportunities there in kind of these various markets.
Yeah.
Yes, very interesting indeed. Thank you so much. There's a question around coming on a tour to visit your mill. So is it something that you do on a regular basis, perhaps during your peak tourism season? How would one go around contacting you or?
Well, unfortunately, our focus is on production, and health and safety generally means that's very challenging for us to open our mill to the general public. Certainly, if you drop us an email, we would try and accommodate a walk around the mill. It's just that the practicalities of that can sometimes be challenging. But yeah, we've got our mill shop over in Stornoway as well. I think both of you, all of you, and Mark as well, kindly visited our mill shop. So we're certainly working on trying to bring that mill experience to anyone that's coming to the island and doing lots of great things around that.
Sure.
I did some major damage on my credit card by visiting your shop, but it's hard to resist because it's such beautiful product.
Thank you, Matthew. Do come back.
I'm doing my bit.
Also available online.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I saw a question earlier about where to buy cloth directly. Obviously, you can buy it through your website, and we'll be sure to share that. Do you know of any brands currently in Canada that are selling your product?
Well, you mentioned Holt Renfrew.
Yeah,
Um,
Canadian.
We'd have to have a double check on other. We'll come back to you on any Canadian names, but we've got a couple. I think there's definitely a bag customer. Yeah, we'll come back to you on some of the Canadian customers
Yeah.
for sure.
And we'd be happy, and we'll share those links with all of the
Yeah,
participants, so hopefully drive some more sales for you directly and indirectly.
thank you. Thank you.
We had a question about the weight of fabric.
Emmeline bags, I can see, yes. Yeah, Emmeline bags. Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
So in terms of grams per meter, do you have different weights of fabrics that you offer, or is it just one style?
No, we do offer 3 weights of fabric. Our average is about 470 to 500 grams a running meter on the 150 width. We have a slightly lighter and a slightly heavier either side of that base fabric. So our heaviest fabric, which previously had been used for coats and outerwear, is really what's used for upholstery now, because it's got that extra strength, the extra wool packed into the weft, and then extra milling when the cloth is warm and wet. So you really create a strong fabric that will withstand 40,000 rubs on a martindale. And then we do a lighter weight cloth on the other side that's sitting at about 450 grams.
Wonderful. Someone is asking whether you're using natural dyes. I don't think so, but would you like to add anything on that, Margaret?
So yeah, when the industry scaled up, so after Lady Dunmore had registered the brand and tried to bring what has become now the Harris Tweed industry, but try and bring some stability and income to her tenants on the North Harris estate. As that progressed and the mill operations started around about the 1930s, at that point, that home dyeing, so lichens and other natural ways of dyeing wool had that stopped at that point due to the sheer scale. So what you can do in a kitchen and in a domestic setting is very different to what you can do. All of our dyes, we are exploring any natural dyes we can. At the moment, colour fastness is the challenge. All of our dyes are synthetic. They are entirely compliant with all the legal requirements around that for the global markets in which we operate.
Thank you so much. There's a nice question from Jen, perhaps to wrap up our discussion around the cultural impact of Harris Tweed. Do you have any favorite examples of your fabrics used in the movie industry or in any films?
Well, film industry. I think we had such an exciting run last year with the Christian Dior show. We're still star-studded from that. I think there was some movie stars
we've seen a few people wearing them on the run, on the catwalks and on the red carpets. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
We do have, I think our biggest almost claim to fame is that Taylor Swift wore one of our designs. So they used our designs on a couple of different fabrics. So she wasn't wearing Harris Tweed, unfortunately, but she was wearing a design that was made in Shawbost. So that's probably our biggest celebrity to date. But we've been involved in a few. Outlander was a big one for us. So we were involved in providing fabric for their show. I believe they've got a prequel that they're starting, or they're starting a new season of. So you might see some Harris Tweed in that too. Doctor Who, I think, famously wore some Harris Tweed.
Definitely Harris Tweed.
But yeah, movies, I think, is maybe that could be our next target.
We like playing Spot the Harris Tweed, certainly on the catwalk shows. Some of the Instagram people as well, but we've been having a lovely time with all your Paris Fashion Week, your Milan Fashion Week, London Fashion Week, spotting the amazing creations. And we had a really exciting one in this week that we can't talk about because we're sworn to secrecy. But seeing the collections and the creations that are coming from menswear, and we saw some of them, like the Tom Brown collection, is always so exciting as to what they're going to create using Harris Tweed. But also some of the more traditional markets as well are hugely important to us as a small textile industry in terms of those orders coming in on a regular basis.
Keep an eye out on our social media, and you might see an exciting
mega star
and some Harris Tweed.
Well, I'm pleased to share that Toronto is actually second only to Los Angeles in terms of film production in North America. So we have a lot of television and film productions all the time. So we should see how we can make some connections
definitely.
there.
Yeah, for sure, Matthew. I think that's some links we need to foster.
Well, certainly.
That's a lovely note to wrap up on. Thank you so much, Margaret and Ruth. Matthew, I'll pass it to you for some closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Lydia, and thank you again, Margaret and Ruth. Such a pleasure to see you again. And thank you again for your warm hospitality during our last visit there in the fall. It's just so fascinating. I've always from the beginning of myself getting involved in woolwork, have just found Harris Tweed to be such an amazing story. And as I say, it's an example that we hope to learn from and emulate here in Canada, because you've been able to really keep this story and this business going. And to the benefit of your community, which is really inspiring to us. So thank you for all that you do. Speaking of trade missions, of course, this year we aren't going to Scotland, but we will be in the UK. So we are planning for late September to be in London and Yorkshire. We hope that Margaret and Ruth will be able to come down and join us perhaps for some of those events. But for those of you on the call who are interested in joining, we still have a few spots left to join that trade mission, and we will share that link in our follow-up. But thank you all for joining for this month's Spinning Yarns speaker series. We look forward to having you at the next one. Do we have our, Lydia, I should ask, do we have our next speaker confirmed?
Yes, our next speaker is confirmed. It will be on April 24th, and it will be one of our Wool Innovation Prize winners, the General Bean, who are based in British Columbia, and they make really lovely needle felting kits and home articles. And so we're really excited to have them as our next speaker. So all the details will be posted early next week.
Wonderful. Well, we look forward to seeing everyone there. Thank you again, Margaret and Ruth, and have a lovely rest of your day. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.